Delight is the origin of things and not desire. It's a very powerful truth Sri Aurobindo reveals, and a truth meant for the strong. Desire is a deformation, it's a movement in ignorance to once again seek that delight which is missing. It's a movement in ignorance because it's a movement of self limitation. Desire is born because of self limitation. The difference between delight and desire, among many, there are many differences, but one of them is that delight is self existent by its very nature. It doesn't depend on this or that object. But desire seeks an object and believes that if it has the object, it will get happiness. It feels momentarily a joy and pleasure, which is one disguise that delight is wearing. But if we begin to get too much lost in the disguise, that joy, that object is removed out of our sight. So then we experience pain. So pain is the next level of evolutionary movement. This too is a disguise. It draws us towards that which we are missing, but it is leading us towards something still greater. So when we experience pain, the third movement we make is a movement of indifference. These are the three disguises. That's why when people when they lose something, they first go through pain and sorrow, or something unhappy happens in their life. Then the next movement is indifference, when they don't feel much. It's a stone-like phase. And then they get ready for the next level of joy or next kind of comfort zone. This is how the whole movement is going on. And what we are doing here is playing Ludo, a huge cosmic Ludo. I think Saint Gyaneswar must have had a glimpse of this. He was a great saint. That's how Gyaneshwari Gita is really a treatise. So that's why he is the person who first devised the Ludo. I don't know what was the name. Somebody would Gyan something. It is the first Ludo. Of course, Ludo in another form has also existed. It's of Indian origin. As I said, Lord Shiva and Parvati play Ludo. But in India, way back, it was called Chaupad, where you play with dice and you have those little things that move. Now imagine a Ludo. We all have played Ludo, I'm sure. And imagine a Ludo where, and also on the other side is snakes and ladders. Now imagine you are playing snakes and ladders and everything is going, you just throw all the right dices and you go tuck, tuck, tuck from one ladder to another and finish the game in 5 moves. Maybe 1 or 2 times you'll enjoy it, but after a while it'll become very boring. So there are ups and downs, and from both sides. You reach 98, you are back to 2. There used to be huge snake, I remember. And there also used to be a wonderful ladder. From 13 it will take you to 91. So, it adds to the joy of the game. At the end you go through all the points and spots. So where is the problem? The problem is that we sometimes forget that we are playing a game and we identify with those pieces. And then we start taking the game bit too seriously. This is what the mother says. That this wonderful sun of divine laughter, we should always look towards that. Someone spoke about adverse forces and all. Mother said, look past the adversary. Smile. Look towards that wonderful sun of delight that stands behind creation. And then she says, the only people that bore me and from whom I like to stay little away are those who are very serious. Serious people are very difficult, very dangerous also. It's a game. At the end of the day, we have played, I'm sure all of us have played Ludo several times. Would you really remember with whom you won or whom you lost and how many times you won or lost? At the end we remember, it was fun. That is the essence of Ludo. It was fun, great fun. But when we are kids, we don't realize it's fun. So, one of the things that kids do when they are seeing that they are losing the game, they just throw away the board. And they start crying. And they start blaming whoever is sitting opposite. But actually, It's none of this is necessary. It's a game. Through all this we grow. It's a joy in that. But till we understand it's a game, it actually in experience when we are like little babies in terms of our inner growth, then it's real pain. Like that little baby is a real pain. You can't explain to a baby it's a game. Look, you can play again. Doesn't matter. Come, so many chocolates. No. Why was I losing the game? That's the end of the story. But as he grows up, so there is nothing to be explained to a child. Beyond a point, the child will grow up, and when he grows up, he will realize it was foolish of me. This is Divine's method. He does not keep on explaining to us, why did this happen to me? And heaven suddenly doesn't peel off, an answer comes, why this happened to you? Nothing. He simply helps us grow. Now, when we grow, we look back and say, oh, okay, we understand. Yeah, whatever happened is okay. And then you develop the trust that whatever is happening now is also okay. It's moving towards something very beautiful which I may not fathom at this point of time. And this is called in the parlance of yoga, Kalyan Shraddha. Sri Aurobindo emphasizes a lot on this. He says, apart from equanimity and surrender, the one thing necessary for a sadhak is Kalyan Shraddha. The faith that all will be well. And everything that is happening is leading towards a grand prefigured event. This is one part. But still the experience is very real of darkness. And what is it when we have made that big bungee jumping into this darkness and don't know how to get back? And we are surrounded by all kinds of threatening forces, dangerous creatures, of which the most dangerous is us, humanity. We don't know what to do about it. So what do? We find ourselves alone, struggling with the darkness. This is a question which is very practical, and this is what now Sri Aurobindo takes up. By the way, see, I was telling that human beings love to create new adventures. So today only I was watching this news, yesterday we spoke about bungee jumping. So now, bungee, and we were talking about that what next? Probably jumping without a cord. Actually, yesterday there was a news, not on TV, the internet news, that they have devised this new way where they do bungee jumping without a cord. Now guess how? So they have discovered that by creating strong opposite magnetic field and putting a magnet on the person, so he will jump without any cord, but as he comes into the magnetic field, he will just stay there. He can't go down. So the first bungee jumping took place yesterday of this kind. So it was quite a maybe prophetic or maybe some kind of a simultaneous thing, that because they must have got bored of bungee jumping with the rope. There has to be something new. Now, it's at one level madness, but this is how human beings are struggling and striving to get something which is, behind this wanting something new. Probably it's a obviously mistaken way. But this is how this love for adventure dates back to our first adventure, when we plunged ourselves headlong into this darkness. But once we are here, we find the darkness very real and very threatening. Like somebody who goes into a forest, when people tell ki, oh, it's a lovely forest, but suddenly they find that, clouds have come across, they have lost the way, and it can be very, very threatening to those who are trapped there. So Ashwapati very naturally asks this question, but Sri Aurobindo puts it very beautifully. Ashwapati is a seer. Look, even the perfection of the poetry, the way Sri Aurobindo puts it. Then Ashwapati answered to the seer. Now there are questions here, but these questions are kind of answers. They are also carrying within themselves a truth. Is then the spirit ruled by an outward world? We are on page 456. Is then the spirit ruled by an outward world? It's not just a question, but yes, we have plunged into the darkness. But is it really so that darkness is so strong? O seer, is there no remedy within? Perhaps he's also conscious that the queen is hearing all this and he must reveal the full truth and not only stop midway. But what is fate if not the spirit's will, after long time fulfilled by cosmic force? So this is in 2 lines, an essence of fate, which will come later on also. That if we will persistently for something, it will realize itself. So the trick is to will rightly. Because if we will wrongly, then by the time it fulfills itself, we say, oh my God, I really asked for something which I shouldn't have had. This is another kind of game that we get it after long time, fulfilled. Oh, is it? Did I ask for it? Or you gave me? No, you asked for it. Think about it. And by then it's like we have to go through that whole process. So what is fate? If not the spirit's will, after long time fulfilled by cosmic force. But this is the process through which we learn how to will rightly, how to will truly. I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compeer of fate? So the other part of fate is that there is no challenge given to us of which we are not capable of meeting it with the spirit strength. It's meant to bring out the spirit strength. This is the original reason. And the mother has gone on to say, measure by measure, the difficulty is equal to your soul strength. And she uses the word measure by measure, almost like saying gram by gram. So you are not given a difficulty more than what your spirit strength can bear. So these are two truths he has revealed. That what after all is fate, Narad, all this is fine, but at the end of the day, it's what my soul has chosen. And it has the strength. When it takes up a challenge and a difficulty, it has the strength to go through it. So it's a great truth. But Sri Aurobindo puts a question mark. He wants Narad to now give some more comments on it. And so we have this beautiful one line, but Narad answered, covering truth with truth. It's not a question. It's Ashwapati. He's a seer. He knows things. But today is Narad's day. And perhaps Queen will listen more if Narad says. If Ashwapati says, she'll probably say, you keep quiet. Let him say. So he's also a very practical person. He knows. So he wants Narad to speak out. That part also. Otherwise he would stop. A vast disguise conceals the eternal bliss. It's a very powerful thing. He could stop there. Upanishads have stopped there. Anandam Brahmeti. What do you ask after that? In fact, one of the Upanishads, when it says after that, what is there after Ananda? It simply says, ha ha hu hu. You can't say anything, you are amazed. You just fall away because there is nothing you can talk about it. So now Ashwapati, thankfully for all of us, brings out from Narad something else. And now starts another level of revelation and something very powerful, difficult to digest. O Ashwapati, random seem the ways along whose banks your footsteps stray or run in casual hours or moments of the gods, yet your least stumblings are foreseen above. Now the whole load of karma is somewhere else. Is taken as suddenly with one stroke on a very different plane. The mother says this is true of a timeless plane of existence. She's spoken about this. She says it is true at one level. Everything is foreseen. Of course, it doesn't mean what breakfast I am going to have today. Tomorrow, well. It's not about that. But stumblings in the process of life. We go up, down. We do things which help us advance. Like snake and ladder game, things which help us temporarily come back. All these are foreseen. These are part of a huge plan. This several places it has come in Savitri. All that we see are part of a huge plan. Yet your least stumblings are foreseen above. Very reassuring. Infallibly the curves of life are drawn. Following the stream of time through the unknown, they are led by a clue the calm immortals keep. The gods, the great gods who weave fate, they are aware of what's going to happen because they are the ones who are pushing us through it. It's a door, it's a passage. We have to go through it. And they know it. Man does not know. Naturally, if he knows the whole play, it will be very difficult for him to act. probably he will just stop acting, and it's not a healthy thing because his action is part of the play. That's why when Sri Aurobindo sent Durai Swami Iyer as his emissary to the Congress, then Congress, to accept the Cripps proposal, they refused. In fact, Gandhiji had this to say that no, it would be a post-dated check. And when it came back, he came back to Sri Aurobindo, he said, now there will be chaos. It was grace knocking at the doors and they have refused it. So, Durai Swami Iyer asked him, you must have known it. Why did you send me? Then he said, for a little bit of Nishkam Karma. And then he explained it beautifully. He said, even if you know that this is not going to succeed, yet by doing it, you have put the balance of fate on a certain side, so that in future it will realize itself. So even when we know, but since we do not know the secret, therefore fate is concealed from us, because we will immediately start, okay, let's change the plan. That's what Queen wants. Let's change the plan. Let's find number 2. A being less rare would be a better fate. That's how she believes that, Satyavan may be jewel of earth. What is the use of having 1 year of Satyavan? Go and choose somebody who is NRI with, fat salary, 5-figure income, and it's a better, after all. Why should you suffer in a hermitage with a man who for 1 year is going to live? This is the common thinking. But Savitri, who is a knower of truths, she says, no, it has come my way, I take the challenge. I chose. That time I didn't know. I can't go back on it. I will go through it and take it as a challenge of my soul. The blazoned hieroglyphs of Prophet Mons, the blazoned hieroglyph of Prophet Mons, a meaning more sublime in symbols writes, than sealed thought wakes to, but of this high script, how shall my voice convince the mind of earth? How beautiful this image is. Every morning we wake up, blazoned hieroglyph. On the sky there is a play of colors. It's a hieroglyph. Those who know how to decipher, they will say, today, I think it's going to rain. Looking at the sky. Oh, it's going to be a pleasant day. Things like that. Oh, the season is changing. It's a much deeper hieroglyph than, what human mind can even imagine. So similarly, every morning when we wake up, we don't know, but it's like a prophet morn. What is to come has come close to us. It is going to happen maybe afternoon or evening, but we are not aware of it. And it hides its significance behind symbolic events. But Narad says, how will I convince? Because people believe that if there is God, He must always grant what I wish. And if He is not there to grant what I wish, why did I put me into a situation from which I cannot extricate myself? So here comes a very, very powerful answer, worth remembering for all times. Heaven's wiser love rejects the mortal's prayer. This is wonderful. So when something is granted to us, we should be grateful, obviously. When something is not granted to us, we should be even more grateful, because that was a wise love. This is a wiser love. Both are love, because the divine has no other movement except love. At one place, Sri Aurobindo writes in one of his aphorisms, if He created hell, it must be only out of love as a shortcut to heaven. For verily, He only loves. Divine has no other movement except love. So if He creates a situation, circumstance which is very difficult, overwhelming, it means it will eventually lead me through a leap. Some people love shortcuts. Shortcuts are bumpy roads. So it's all right. He's taking us through the bumpy road. Heaven's wiser love rejects the mortal's prayer. That's why Narad is saying, how will I convince? Majority of people will think that no. If there is God, He must be all the time like Bruce Almighty clicking on a computer button and saying prayer, granted. So if prayers are not granted, God doesn't exist. Particularly my prayer. 100 people's prayers may have been granted, but my prayer I prayed, but it was not granted. Therefore, God doesn't exist. QED. But this is an absurdity, nothing else. If God is wiser than us, then surely He knows a little better than us what is better for us. In one place, Mother very touchingly says, mankind would be far more happier and its journey will be swifter if it knew that the wisdom that has built the world knows better than themselves. And another place he says, if only people could be convinced that I know a little more than those who depend on me. It was difficult, even when the divine is incarnate and embodied. It was difficult to trust that Mother knows. In fact, she uses the word at least a little more. It is literally divine pleading to human beings. Please trust me. If I am saying this, there is a meaning in it. And there are so many examples. Once when somebody was asked by the Mother to leave the ashram and go, he believed that it's no fault of his. Sincerely he believed that I have not done the mistake and Mother has asked me to go. So he went and asked Nalinida that, what should I do? I mean, Mother has asked me to leave, but really speaking, it's not my fault, etc., etc. So Nalinida gave a very beautiful reply, and really it comes from the heights of wisdom. If Mother says you go, take it as a grace and go. If Mother says you go, take it as a grace and go. Don't try to mentally try to understand it. Very difficult for the human intellect to grasp this. And then he went. He accepted it. And after 10-15 years, he said, this was really the act of grace that came to me from Mother. It's not about human logic trying to find a way. Human logic works within small narrow strip. But the divine grace sees across aeons, not just centuries. Unblinded by the breath of his desire, unclouded by the mists of fear and hope, it bends above the strife of love with death. It keeps for her privilege of pain. What a line. To start with, all those places where all our desires are satisfied and fulfilled freely are very often places where dark entities are there. They grow fat with our desire and make our ego fat by fulfilling these desires. But this is not really our relation with the divine. Maybe in our kindergarten stage it is all right. But the divine does both. Sometimes he satisfies a desire, sometimes he takes away what we want. Both are part of the same act of grace. And then this marvelous line, it keeps for her. It's not that he does not know that Savitri is so beautiful, she has never harmed anybody. That's what the queen's question is, that why my child? She has never harmed anyone. She is always full of goodwill. Why is she to have chosen someone who is going to die? And on top of it, she is so stubborn that she is refusing to change herself. Why? So here is a line where he says, heaven has kept for her. What has it kept reserved for her? Her privilege of pain. It's not given to everybody. It's her privilege of pain. A greatness in thy daughter's soul resides, that can transform herself and all around, but must cross on stones of suffering to its goal. So she is being given a momentous choice. She can either rise to greatness by crossing on stones, or she can refuse that for the moment, choose an easier path. Because earlier we are told that man turns aside or chooses easier paths. That is the easier path where, okay, I choose something which will immediately satisfy my ego or fulfill my desire. But who is going to take this big challenge? So he says that she has to cross to discover that. Although designed like a nectar cup of heaven, of heavenly ether made, she sought this air. She too must share the human need of grief, and all her cause of joy transmute to pain. Amazing this. No, it's really beyond description. The very thing that gives us joy changes into cause for pain. The cause of joy, Satyavan, her love, becomes a cause for pain. This is given to her, her destiny, her fate. The gods have chosen this for her. They have designed, and you can't alter it. The mind of, then he describes how human mind works. The mind of mortal man is led by words. His sight retires behind the walls of thought and looks out only through half open doors. Sees a little strip, misses the whole, and therefore it misses the total picture. Whereas if it could see the total picture, it would understand. But we see only a fragment, a moment, sometimes at the most maybe one lifetime. So we see, oh, he was a good man, he suffered and he died. But we don't know that what is going to come. There was this lady who, of course, mother's unconditional love was with everyone. But this particular lady, she used to live outside, but any time could go to mother. She would even sometimes be very harsh in her dealing with the mother, could say anything, and mother would bear everything and continue to give her love, and she had free access. And once Champaklalji asked her, mother, why mother so much, you have for this lady? What's so special about her? Mother says, you don't know, she has suffered a lot in her previous life. Now, this knowledge is with that consciousness. We don't have. So we sometimes wonder when we see things which are of a very unexpected nature. But the divine knows that he sees across the many lives. So we take a small strip for heaven. He stares at infinite possibility and gives to the plastic vast the name of chance. So there are at any given point many possibilities before us. The end is certain, but we have to choose among each of these possibilities, and for that choice we are pushed by plenty of forces from all around. This direction, that direction. We may choose this, we may choose that. But eventually, whichever way we choose, we will be led towards that great goal. It's very amazing. I have discovered this in the context of the ashram. It is true even in the world. It's a subtle formation in the occult world. This is my understanding. And Mother gives us freedom. Depending on what we choose, the road opens. Depending again on what we choose, another road and another kind of experience is open. There are people who will come and find everything bad, everybody bad. And they have to go through that. There are people who will come and find everything beautiful. Everybody is like a miniature saint, for God's sake. But they meet like that. And another kind of route opens for them. It's amazing. And she carries each one through that set of experiences. It's like, depending on which way we choose, those doors of possibilities will open. But still there will be constant pressure to carry us towards that prefigured end. So every time there is a infinite possibility, we think we have just chosen this little thing and therefore we are having this consequence. But it's not that. That consequence is meant to lead us back on course, back onto the point from where we diverted ourselves. He sees the long results of an all-wise force, planning a sequence of steps in endless time, but in its links imagines a senseless chain. All-wise force, which sees through all the links. We see just one fraction, a fragment, and we think it is meaningless and senseless. Or the dead hand of cold necessity, he answers not to the mystic mother's heart, misses the ardent heavings of her breast, and feels cold, rigid limbs of lifeless law. What is the mother's heart? Come to me, come to me, come to me, come closer to me. That story of same Narada who goes to fetch water for Krishna and in the bargain forgets about the water gets married, has children, and then loses all of them. And one night he is cursing God. Whoever you are, wherever you are so terrible. You have taken away everything from me. And that time he hears a voice again in his heart. Narad, I am thirsty. For God's sake, you went to get some water for me. Where is that water? Mystic Mother's heart. Through everything, she is drawing us close to her. If only we could make that response, then everything will be sorted out. But we end up complaining, cursing, grumbling, putting more and more walls between us and the divine. That's what several times Mother says. When you grumble and complain, then you put a wall between me, between grace and yourself. If you really came like that, open, given to my love, then things would change. So we don't make that answer. So we think, oh, it's a cold, lifeless law. How could this happen? That too to me, because everybody is the best person in the world. So when Mother was asked, what does it mean, Satyamev Jayate, good shall triumph? We don't see it. So Mother says, yes, everybody believes in his opinion that he is true, to start with. So Satyamev Jayate, it's a great truth, profound truth. It means that ultimately truth will have the final victory. That's not the truth of our small little local truths. It's something very vast. It will have the final victory. And it can have a victory even through defeat. Look, the game of dice for the Pandavas. They lost the game. And Krishna is on their side. And they believed he is God incarnate. But see how they behaved. They did not say, we believed you to be God, but now we know for sure that you are not God. We are going to find some other God, more suitable, who will fulfill our desires. They didn't say that there is a Babaji near Hastinapur who grants everybody's wishes, we are going to now plead to him. They simply said, doesn't matter Krishna, you are with us. That's all. And how through every twist and turn of fate, Krishna prepares them for the great battle and the eventual victory. So this is called trust in the divine and responding to the mystic Mother's heart. The will of the timeless working out in time, in the free, absolute steps of cosmic truth, he thinks a dead machine or unconscious fate. So it's not a lifeless law that you did a karma and you get a result, you paid 100 rupees to somebody or snatched away somebody's 100 rupees, so in this birth you have to give it with interest. It's not a lifeless law. We turn it into a ridiculous thing. Oh, you lost some money, you may have had to give it to him. How do we know that today we have given and next life we are going to take it? I mean, it can go to any absurdity. Karma is not that. It's an evolutionary mechanism, and behind the law of karma, there is a wisdom which helps us to grow towards that end. And now come some magical lines. A magician's formulas have made matter's laws. How beautiful. Really, if we look deep inside matter, we discover it. Now scientists are discovering that it's a magician's formula. How is Sri Aurobindo revealing this great truth? Now people are saying that if you look at matter from a certain standpoint, then everything is rigid, follows a certain kind of law. If you look at matter from another point, then it's a one continuous movement of wave. From one standpoint, it is particles drifting in space, jostling with each other. From another standpoint, it's just a wave, a huge wave which is simply crisscrossing, and it's a different vision of matter, a different set of laws. And the Mother reveals this in Agenda, that I understand why people are not able to see me as I am. She says, I know myself, my body, she says, as strong, young, she gives, luminous, plastic, but people don't see me like this. So she says, why? Then she goes to the depth of it and she says, now I understand. There is a certain angle of vision from which you see false matter. Matter as it appears to our perception, which is very rigid, which is full of these small, small particles. But she says there is another movement of matter. And I experience the whole body like that. It's a wave-like movement in a huge wave. She speaks about it, the true body. That's how it should be. But we are not like that. We are stiff and rigid bodies. So as if behind this there is another something, a true matter. And she uses the word true matter. So it's a magician's formula. You look at it this way, it appears this. Probably because of the intervention of the inconscient, it has turned this. But this is not the original matter. The original matter is something very different. So a magician's formulas have made matter's laws. And while they last, all things by them are bound. But the spirit's consent is needed for each act. And freedom walks in the same pace with law. A great truth. We can refuse. We can say no. This is there, deep inside. How do we consent? People will say, no, but I didn't want. I fell sick. What do you mean I want? I don't want illness, but we consent. How do we consent? By fear. Oh my God, such a terrible illness gone. This is a consent. Mother uses the word, fear is hidden consent. So when we are besieged by circumstances, situations, oh, this is impossible. This is consent. And we have very good friends who also say, oh my God, you are caught up in a very difficult situation. So there is more consent from all those with so-called goodwill who make it even worse. So after a while, inwardly, we give it up. This is, yes, this I can't do anything beyond it now. This is the end. So this way we give a consent. It compels us, shows dreadful mass, and eventually it takes our consent. Sometimes, of course, we love the illness. It has, by the way, many secondary benefits. It may make us feel great, special, especially if there is a tremendous, terrific illness. You know, great people have great illnesses, not some ordinary illness. So it can make us feel special. Or sometimes a very good way to take time out. Sometimes that's the only way that people come and say, oh, how are you? People who have for long forgotten you. So there are so many ways that we consent. We believe, by our belief we consent. That we are ignorant, mortals, poor creatures, meant to bend beneath the yoke. Therefore we consent because we limit ourselves. We think we are only the body and there is nothing beyond the body. Therefore we consent. We believe in the highly qualified MD doctor, graduated and post-graduated from so and so, more than the divine's words. Therefore we consent. So there are 100 ways we consent. But there is a possibility that we may not consent. This freedom is given to us, but we don't know and we don't utilize it. It's an option with us, but we have never exercised that option. All here can change if the magician choose. This what Mother repeatedly keeps telling in the agenda. And repeatedly people would go and tell her this illness, that illness, and she would say repeatedly that no, these are not illnesses but habits. Habits of matter. And it can change. So how to change? Now the Mother is giving us a formula. Because there has to be some, it's not like magic means just we put a wand. We can exercise that freedom. But to exercise that freedom, we have to first activate. You know, when we are given credit card, it doesn't work automatically. You have to use it once, then it gets activated. So we have the key, but we don't use it. So we have to once activate it. Here maybe 10 times we have to activate it, then becomes routine. Then the debit card changes also into a credit card. I hope I am right with my limited understanding. Debit card is the lesser one. Credit card is better. No, it's not good. But otherwise, so first it is a debit card. So it trains us. Within that account limit, we have to draw. Then when we learn to use it, then the divine says, okay, I am upgrading your card to credit card. You can draw a little more. But we have to learn to use it. It's so frightening. I mean, I was afraid of taking a credit card because I always used to feel this is, my God, you should keep it away. All these fears are there. So we don't take it, we don't activate it. Like many people have fear of smartphones. I also had fear of smartphone. My God, if I get lost in all this jumble of so many icons, how will I handle it? Once you start handling, you realize that WhatsApp is such a cool way to communicate. So now, that's how we have to learn to use that freedom which is given to us. It's not wishful thinking, but there is a possibility. So how to do it? There Sri Aurobindo reveals to us if human will could be made one with God's, first condition. So if we tune our will to the divine will, by surrendering, by offering, by nishkam karma, then slowly our will starts getting tuned to the divine will. It begins to become straight. In the Rig Veda it's said very beautifully, even Ishupnishad ends with this, Agne ne supatharaye. So in the Rig Veda the Rishi prays, O will, make the crooked straight. So it has that purifying effect. Every time we offer our will to the divine, even if it's errant and ignorant, which it will be in the beginning, and offer the results back to the divine, then the touch of the divine begins to make it straight. And after a while, the will becomes aligned to the divine will. And when it is aligned to the divine will, then it can act like a credit card. Sri Aurobindo says this, those who practice speaking the truth, then whatever they say turns out to be true. Now you see, it's very interesting. That is how some of these seers had this capacity. Because if we practice truth, then whatever we say, it may not always be because of foresight, but our tongue can be used by a greater power to release truth, and it becomes truth. So this is one way we can attune ourselves to the divine will, and become free. One way to become free is by tuning. If human thought could echo the thoughts of God, so instead of our thoughts moving in the domain of around our little ego, if our thoughts can again try to reach out to the divine, move towards the divine through contemplation, meditation, reading things which are full of that divine consciousness, in short, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's book, in brief, only Savitri, then the human thought can begin to echo the thoughts of God. Because it will start getting transformed by the touch of the divine. That's what the Mother says. If you read Savitri, it will create new brain cells for the understanding. How does Savitri do this transmutation? By the very act of reading, the brain cells start receiving this sound. Instead of the sound of our own thoughts, they start receiving these sounds. Now these sounds begin to work upon matter. And then there is a retuning. We start developing certain kinds of bridges between us and the divine. And then the thoughts begin to echo the thoughts of God, like Narada at this point of time. Man might be all-knowing and omnipotent. This is the great possibility for man. Of course, all-knowing and omnipotent means for him, for his life, whatever is needed, he has lost the spontaneous instinct of the animal life through the mind, coming of the mind. But he can grow into an intuitive knowledge, an intuitive wisdom, and an intuitive power. This is a possibility. But now he walks in nature's doubtful ray. Mind is the doubtful ray. Yet can the mind of man receive God's light. This is another possibility, that it can open to the divine. So simple ways, when we read Mother and Sri Aurobindo's works, one way is to take it that if Mother and Sri Aurobindo say this, it is true. That's the end of the story. My mind may not understand it, and the mind's logic may say that no, things should be otherwise, but they have said it's true. Now what happens in the process, some people will think it's a kind of blind faith and blind surrender. Maybe some may think it's stupidity, but by exercising this stupidity, we grow towards wisdom. Sometimes we have to pass through the passage of stupidity to grow into wisdom. But if we take the other approach, no, but Schopenhauer has said something else. And Bertrand Russell also had read. He has said something very different from what Sri Aurobindo says. Now, this is not the path towards receiving light. Then we will move in nature's doubtful ray. But if we open the mind, receive it, simply pray for light, for truth, then slowly that light will first trickle, maybe drop by drop, then trickle, then it will be an avalanche. And then we'll grow slowly towards the omniscience. The force of man can be driven by God's force. But again, the condition is that we no more want to simply be driven by the ego's limited force. It's the same force, but it's a very limited force, the force of desire. Then is he a miracle doing miracles. For only so can he be nature's king. So the whole roadmap he has given: tune the will to the divine will, open the mind to the divine light, tune the thoughts to the higher intelligence, to the greater light, tune our force to the divine force, and then we too will share in the omniscience and omnipotence of divine, and we too will walk free, master of fate and destiny. The mother says that one of the things that happens when the psychic being awakens and comes fully in the front, she describes it beautifully. Then you walk a free person, master of destiny and circumstances. But before that, we are bound. So there is a possibility that man can become the master of fate. And therefore, he ends this very beautifully. It is decreed, and Satyavan must die. So, he comes back after this whole thing. It is decreed, and Satyavan must die. The hour is fixed, chosen the fatal stroke. What else shall be is written in her soul. How beautiful this is. Don't worry, she still can handle it. The greatness of the great comes out in moments of adversity. It is decreed, this much is decreed. But what can be after that? So normal person will say, what can be after that? I mean, what worse can my fate be after 1 year? My husband is going to go away, and he will cry and say, poor fate, poor God, bad luck, my karma, etc., etc. But Savitri is not like that. She is not one more pawn born to be pushed across the chessboards of time. To lead, to deliver her is her glorious part. So this is decreed. She has to face the greatest challenge, the divine incarnate. It is decreed that Satyavan and Satyavan must die. The hour is fixed, chosen the fatal stroke. What else shall be is written in her soul. But till the hour reveals the fateful script, the writing waits, illegible and mute. This is the beauty. There are certain events which have come very close, hanging in the subtle physical layer, waiting to precipitate. For most of us, they end up precipitating. But there is something given to man, that he can choose, change, and conquer. There is a very nice, I think it is a Chinese saying, I don't know, Moyang will correct me later on if I am wrong. If you come across a wall, then change and pass through. I don't know, this is what I have heard, but it's something very beautiful. If you come across a wall, then change and pass through. Now, this is something, each crisis comes so that we may change. If we change, we can pass through, we can conquer. But if we cannot, then we suffer. One short break, and then we meet again after 10 minutes.